listening to Adventure Party for the 2nd week of August 2022. This week, Savage and Scarr consult the original Dungeon Master's Guide for Gygax's advice on treasure placement and land management. Also, we spoil the classic 1957 movie Bridge over the River Kwai. The Adventure Party, discussing tabletop related gaming the Irish way.
Yeah, Warlord, I've had a look in the pantry. I found the mushrooms and this, I think it's cheese, but there's no sign of any blood bread. Are you sure this is enough for a kind of a snack?
We could just fill up on cheap blood cider, I suppose, instead.
Why not? Cheaper the better, I say.
Alright, well, I got some Blood and Brains brand Copperberg, so...
I'll stick to the Kilbeggan Firewater. For this is, again, we should turn our attentions back to the tomes, of course. The tomes of Gygax. Welcome back, dear listeners. We left off mid-campaign. Last time we talked to you, we were looking at the campaign chapter, which has about as many sort of side arcs and cul-de-sacs as a regular campaign, I feel. The rules reflecting the game. But we'd finished, if you're playing along at home, we'd finished on page 92. We are about to encounter a pair of exceedingly large, powerful, and ferocious ogres.
Said ogres. The said pair has taken up abode in a chamber at the base of a shaft, which gives to the land above. Alright, we're already in the high Gygaxian register.
And of course, we're finishing off our discussion about placement of monetary treasure in First Ed D&D, and we'll be moving on very swiftly to magic items and where you might find them. Your enemy is holding your magic items, of course.
From here, they raid both the upper lands and the dungeons roundabout. Although you could read that as the dungeon having a weird roundabout, which would be an interesting dungeon procedure.
It just makes the flow of traffic so much easier.
And horses go up and down.
It's safer as well. But not for adventurers.
Not with these ogres around. They have accumulated over 2,000 GP in wealth. But it is obviously not in a pair of 1,000 GP gems. I mean, there's two ogres. That would be rather convenient for them. Rather, they have gathered an assortment of goods whose combined value is well in excess of 2,000 gold nobles, the coin of the realm. Rather than stocking a treasure which the victorious player characters can easily gather and carry to the surface, you maximize the challenge by making... I love the idea of making the GM automatically complicit in this wild expression of artistic and hostile logistics.
Sort of a bric-a-brac, yeah.
You maximize the challenge by making it one which ogres would naturally accrue in the process of their raiding. There are many copper and silver coins in a large locked iron chest. There are pewter vessels worth a fair number of silver pieces. An inlaid wooden coffer worth 100 gold pieces alone holds a finely wrought silver necklace worth an incredible 350 gold pieces. Food and other provisions scattered around amount to another 100 or so gold nobles value, and one of the ogres wears a badly tanned fur cape which fetch 50 gold pieces nonetheless. Wait, why is it tan? Isn't tanning what you do to leather? Why are you doing it to a fur cape?
Well, you have to tan fur as well, otherwise it's just rotting skin. I looked into tanning my own leather a while back. It turns out getting hold of a hide, very cheap. You can get an entire cow hide for about maybe 40 or 50 euros in this country. That's because the process of tanning them is very, very involved, incredibly toxic, and takes an awful lot of work, which is why leather goods are expensive. So yeah, it's and if you are not in possession of a journeyman tanner at least, then it is very likely any hide you attempt to tan is going to turn out to be badly tanned. A bit like some influencers.
Finally, there are several good helmets, used as drinking cups, a bardiche, and a two-handed sword with silver wire wrapped around its hilt, and a lapis lazuli pommel to make it worth 3 times its normal value, which complete the treasure. If the adventurers overcome the ogres, they must still recognise all the items of value and transport them to the surface. What is left behind will be taken by other residents of the netherworld in no time at all, so the bold victors have quite a task before them. It did not end with a mere slaying of ogres.
On that point, can I just point out that most adventuring groups are like SEAL Team 6 in the Bin Laden compound. Take everything. Just bundle it up, boys. We'll figure it all out when we get home. Give it to the half-orc. He can carry it.
But I suspect that Gygax's response to this would be to demand to know how they're carrying both of these giant weapons and the chests.
Bag of holding, mate. Be grand. The kids have it much easier these days. This is why dungeon donkeys exist. And why I've seen fantastic arguments for training gorillas, as not all dungeons are flat surfaces. Ladders have to be negotiated. I've seen horrible arguments for training the... how can I put this delicately? We don't have a lot of listeners. I don't need to put it delicately. I think it was... I can't remember. Critical Miss. The guy who used to write Critical Miss, whose name escapes me now, once wrote an article outlining the idea that intellectually disadvantaged NPCs could be used as basically beasts of burden inside dungeons. He's a fantastically horrible human being. I think I met once. Lovely guy. But yeah, he advanced this idea. Well, look, I mean, get something really dumb and bipedal, strap some haversacks to it, and make out like a bandit. Right. Moving on.
It just goes back again and again to Gygax's love of logistics as a major form of challenge.
I'm not against it. Johnny Nexus, I think his name was. I'm not against it because it's... Look, I'm the kind of guy who wants to know exactly what's in my backpack and packs... Like, I pack 10-foot poles and bags of caltrops and, other weird stuff on the off chance it could be useful. So I'd like to be presented with those kind of challenges where I'm like, wait a second, I have a ball of string that's just exactly what we need here. But that's perhaps not the norm.
It certainly seems that Gygax is trying to set it up as the norm, or at least a definite feature of, boss loot, as it were. And, I understand...
Oh, hold on. Look, prepare to fail or fail to prepare. Is that right? No, never mind.
Yeah, that sounds... It sounds right.
Yeah, so if your party has said to you, look, we're putting all of these things in place before we go into the dungeon. We've got the guys outside. We've got a donkey train. We've brought trained gorillas, whatever. We've got ample backpacks. Then I think, and grappling hooks and stuff for hauling chests up mine shafts and all that kind of stuff. I think at that point the GM would be wise to simply say, hey, you got it covered. You've addressed all of these concerns. Good call on the pulleys. And hand wave it to you, leave the dungeon with your loot. But if the party haven't done any of that prep, then I feel like it's fair for the GM to go, a gold-plated throne encrusted with emeralds. How are you getting that out of here, mate? You got in through a pantry window. What's the story?
Okay, I'm not trying to be critical of this. I certainly do see some advantages to the playstyle, but I also can see Gygax's temperament come through, where he takes an inordinate amount of glee in challenging people to think critically and brain-strainingly, and what a lot of people would have considered their off hours. It is not that this is a bad playstyle by any means. It is that it is, in Gygax's style, presented as unquestioningly the only playstyle.
But okay, but you've sat at tables where someone who's in real life is an engineer and then crossing a ravine comes up in a campaign, and they're like, "I've got this, boys. Stand back." I was like, "You're playing a bard. Doesn't matter. I know exactly what we should do. That tree over there, we're going to need that down. And those vines, we're going to get about, I'd say, 400 yards of those, and start planting them. The tensile strength of one vine alone won't be sufficient. And all of a sudden, you're in a scenario where you're building the bridge over the River Kwai.
Does everyone die in that movie?
Everybody dies in that movie. The bridge gets finished, and that's the main. That's what we.
Doesn't it get immediately blown up?
That's not the point. That is hardly the point. It's a very good bridge. Alec McGuinness can be very proud of himself. So, point is that while you say that it might not necessarily be a great thing to challenge people to think in their off hours, like if you put a challenge in front of people that they actually know something about, and give them their headway, rather than having decided there's a fixed answer, no matter what your actual experience is, then you might be wise to just step back and let them have at it. You could point out that they're a bard and don't have a hope in hell, but there's a happy medium to be struck here. Not all of the answers, as they say, are on the character sheet.
See future episode.
It's future, past, I don't know at this point.
There's also a shot at Tolkien here. In like manner, the horde of a dragon could destroy a campaign if the treasure of Smaug in the Hobbit were to be used as an example of what such a trove should contain. Not so for the wise DM. He or she will place a few choice and portable items, some not so choice because they are difficult to cart off, and finally, top, or rather bottom and top, the whole with mounds, piles, and layers of copper pieces, silver, etc. There will be much there, but even the cleverest of players will be more than hard put to figure out a way to garner the bulk of it without after driving off, subduing, or slaying the treasure's guardian. Many other avaricious monsters are eagerly awaiting the opportunity to help themselves to an unguarded dragon horde. And news travels fast. Who will stay behind to mind the coins while the rest of the party goes off to dispose of the better part of the loot? Not their henchmen. What a problem. He does sell the conundrum as an interesting thing.
Yeah, and he makes an interesting point. I mean, let's face it. At what point do heist movies actually get good?
Once you get to the vault.
Yeah, but you're only halfway through. You got to get out, and that's something perhaps we've forgotten a little bit. Here's the treasure. You all go home. No, here's the treasure, but the rest of the ogres are beating the door down. How are you getting out of here? That's interesting.
And of course, because we've seen there's these prohibitively expensive training costs to get your levels, the players are incentivized to try to maximize their gains.
Big pockets. You want big pockets, lots of secure compartments in your backpack. You want to carry as evenly distributed weight.
And some way to convince the GM that you're a garage trainer.
Yeah, and that's the best case scenario, folks. There's other less savoury ways of achieving the same end. I must check, but if Critical Miss still exists on the internet somewhere, I'd highly recommend people go and read some of the stuff. It was wild. Johnny Nexus, pretty sure that's the name. Plug it into the Google machine and see what comes out. Very, very entertaining stuff.
It might be on the Wayback Machine instead at this point.
Johnny Nexus, Critical Miss are the guys who wrote the seminal George Wallace owes me an effing boat critique of the Enemy Within campaign. So, great fun. Anyone who's played through that will know what I mean. Death on the Reich.
Yeah, we see previous episode.
It's like time's a flat circle, right? Okay, so that brings us on to... Oh, wait, there's one last paragraph. I'm going to have a crack at this. In the event the generosity should overcome you, and you find that in a moment of weakness you actually allowed too much treasure to fall into the player's hands, there are steps which must be taken to rectify matters. The player characters themselves could become attractive to others seeking such gains. The local rulers will desire a share. Prices will rise for services in demand from these now wealthy personages, etc. All this is not to actually penalise success. It is a logical abstraction of their actions. It stimulates them to adventure anew, and it also maintains the campaign in balance. These rules will see to it that experience levels are not gained too quickly, as long as you do your part as GM. I feel like in that paragraph, Gygax managed to predict about 40% of the articles that were written that sort of start along the lines of Dungeons & Dragons economy is broken. Here's 10 reasons why. It's like, yeah, he knows. He's already addressed it. You just never did anything to fix it.
I don't mind taking treasure from people. Generally, I would be find it more problematic to take XP from people, which unfortunately is sort of one and the same in this scenario. I would feel like sort of more clearly defining is like when do you cash in treasure into XP rules would possibly smooth over the sharper edges of this.
Yeah, if I wanted a house rule, I'd say when you defeat whoever's holding it, you get half the XP. If you get it back to town and spend it, you get the other half.
Yeah, that would be fair. As long as it was something concrete. Even if it was the worst case scenario where you have to bring the entire thing back to town and invest it and drink it all away. Even if it was something as something like that, as long as it was clear and unambiguous, I think I'd have, because then you can set your standard of what is what the stakes are for your treasure transportation, and then they can invest in they can start doing the math and investing in their henchmen and other caravan guards and whatnot.
Be prepared. You gotta spend money to make money in this world. These are venture adventurers, venture capitalist adventures. Wait, no, didn't nail that. There's several. Actually, all of this spawns some interesting genres. Moonlighter and Recettear are two of the more recent examples. Recettear is actually pretty old, but where you play a fantasy world shop owner who stocks their shop with stuff from dungeons, and have to and there's a dungeoneering aspect where you have to go and get the stuff as well, but that's kind of secondary to the whole wheeling and dealing of trying to sell people +1 swords in a feudal economy. So yeah, this whole section has spawned like an entire, like we've talked about other genres of video games that D&D is responsible for, but I have a very soft spot for the magic item shop merchant games that are out there. If actually, folks, if you're listening and you know of any good ones, come along to our Discord and recommend them in the Computer Games channel. I'd love to try out some new ones. Join our Discord.
I know we're going very slowly through this section.
We've sped along until now. I think we're allowed a shopping episode.
It's just that this next paragraph, which is about the placement of magic items, has one of the most rarest of things I've seen in this entire book. And that's a drop of hubris or recognition of past errors.
Okay. Going to have to point it out to me.
Thoughtless placement of powerful magic items has been the ruination of many a campaign. Not only does this cheapen what should be rare and precious, it gives the player characters undeserved advancement and empowers them to become virtual rulers of all they survey. This is in part the fault of this writer, who deeply regrets not taking the time and space in the original D&D to stress repeatedly the importance of moderation. Powerful magic items were shown, after all, on the tables, and a chance for random discovery of these items was given, so that the uninitiated GM cannot be severely faulted for merely following what was set before him or her in the rules. Had the whole been prefaced with an admonition to use care and logic in placement of or random discovery of magic items, had the intent, meaning, and spirit of the game been more fully explained, much of the giveaway aspect of such campaigns would have willingly been squelched by the DMs. The sad fact is that this was not done. So many campaigns are little more than a joke, something that better GMs jape at and ridicule, rightly so on the surface, because of the foolishness of player characters with astronomically high levels of experience and no real playing skill. These godlike characters boast and strut about with retinues of ultra-powerful servants of scores of mighty magic items, artifacts, relics, adorning them as if they were Christmas trees decked out with tinsel and ornaments.
Well, Yeah, leg gasp, and also I do like that he manages to mix in his admission of culpability with a good, generous dollop of snobbery as well. Like,
Yes.
oh, okay.
Swings and roundabouts.
Yeah.
Swings and roundabouts.
He's a master of balancing the different flavors.
Yeah. But he does go on to say that, the opposite is also a problem. Another nadir of dungeon mastering is the killer dungeon concept. These campaigns are a travesty of the role-playing adventure game, for there is no development and identification with carefully nurtured player characters. In such campaigns, the sadistic referee takes unholy delight in slaughtering endless hordes of hapless player characters with unavoidable death traps and horrific monsters set ambush participants as soon as they set foot outside the door of their safe house. Only a few of these killer dungeons survive to become infamous, including one written by Gygax called the Tome of Horrors.
Written for competition play, let's not forget that bit. He's right though, yeah, and he's also responsible.
As their participants usually tire of the idiocy after a few attempts at enjoyable gaming. Some lucky ones manage to find another more reasonable campaign, but others, not realizing the perversion of their DM's campaign, give up adventure gaming and go back to whatever pursuits they followed in their leisure time before they tried D&D. AD&D means to set right both extremes. Neither the giveaway game nor the certain death campaign will be lauded here. In point of fact, DMs who attempt to run such affairs will be drumming themselves out of the ranks of AD&D entirely. Advanced Dungeons & Dragons aims at providing not only the best possible adventure game, but also the best possible refereeing of some campaigns. These are lofty goals.
Well, he's forging ahead into unknown territory. He's climbing peaks. They should be lofty goals. GMs, DMs, and others, storytellers even, the 90s, should have ambition at their heart. Should be aiming to tell the best Garam story they've ever told. And both of these things that he's described get in the way of that. Too much loot or too much harshness don't allow players to live their best lives and don't really allow games to reach their fullest potential. They are both extremes inside the rules, and my word, I imagine he must have sat through quite a few conventions worth of, let me tell you about my game where I totally bossed my players, or let me tell you about my game where I have both the hand, the eye, and the head of Vecna stitched to my character. It's like, okay, there's some work to be done here. Some balancing.
I mean, that's where I heard the origin of the Tomb of Horrors. I know there's all kinds of things, but when someone says competition play, the way I heard it originally was that we would bring the Tomb of Horrors to conventions and sort of challenge everyone with a high-level character in the back pocket to prove that they had earned that character properly by putting them up against the tomb.
Yeah, this feels like being challenged to play Russian roulette with a trick gun, but that's a different aspect thing. I mean, he clearly has a certain sort of gatekeeping mindset in a kind of a games mastery respect. I can understand that. Okay, he expects players to know the rules, at least as much as they can if they're not allowed to read one of the books. And he expects them to exhibit the ability to think through the realities of the problems in front of them and utilize the rules. I feel like there's this very fine, fuzzy line that it's very easy to step over in all sorts of different directions and feel the wrath of the Gygax. But Tomb of Horrors is certainly would test those who have a lot of toys but not a lot of wit, and you're required to sort of, the answer isn't on your character sheets your way through some of the problems it sets, so just having system mastery isn't enough. It's still a brutally unfair game. I
mean, there's 3 ways for you to end up naked with all your treasure trapped behind 3 secret walls and a demi-lich.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like you've got much of a chance at that point, but anyways. Okay, so I don't know. I kind of find myself oscillating wildly between, oh yeah, Gary's onto some stuff here, and oh no, Gary's at it again. It's a heady mix.
It's the fuel. It's the two-stroke engine of this book.
That's brilliant. Yes, it is. It was a very distinctive sound.
I mean, sometimes the strokes take quite a bit of the book. Like, for example, here at the top of page 93, he says, you should never allow random determination to dictate the inclusion of any meaningful magic item. And I'm just thinking, then why are there tables on page 120 outlining all of the possible magic items?
And if you don't have a copy of the book in front of you, folks, it's never in capital letters, and any in capital letters. Gary, I got a table I want to show you.
It's on page 120. It goes on for a while.
Wild. Okay. Makes you wonder, are the tables just there to make you feel like you've bought something useful, but the actual meat is the prose, the written advice? I think we sometimes mistake why supplements are actually useful. And if we see tables and random roll tables and matrices and new archetypes, new classes and things, we think we've bought something useful. But the reality are new magic items. New magic items feature in almost any D&D or role-playing product that people want to pick up, or items in general. But is that really useful if it's going to, having more than one of them in your campaign is going to make things pretty wild? Is Gary kind of on a truth here? It's very hard to sell people advice, though. They want it for free and they consider it worth what they paid for it.
It's tough to know the balance of actionable, solid mechanics and, just genuine good advice that people of all skill levels can take on board. It's a difficult sell, and you're going to see as we go through. Every so often, it's going to go into super critical percentile chances on a lot of things, and people are going to be debating those rules forever. And a lot of the good advice just gets put to the wayside.
Okay, so in stocking the setting for initial play in the campaign, so is this like talking about the entire world, the entire campaign world? Yeah, use great care. Consider the circumstances of the milieu. Take a drink, folks. Number of player characters, etc. Then from the list of possible items, choose a selection, which is commensurate with the setting. I do like his prose. It's very readable.
It's high Gygaxian.
It's high Gygaxian. Yeah, it rolls out there. This guy wrote a lot of box text. You can tell. Yeah, as campaign grows and deeper dungeons are developed, exercise the same care and placement to select and balance magic items. And in fairness, magic items that don't have... So I've got two favoured modes of magic items, and they're both narrative focused. Either the magic item that is tied to the history of the world, and I mean tied to the story you're telling. You're not finding a random +1 sword. You're finding the random +1 sword that is tied, that is, previously owned by the general of the army that you have found yourself in command of. And its purpose, its legend is to defeat the ogre threat, and you're up against ogres.
What was that one that got that ice cream was 4 years ago or something? We rolled up using the 5th ed tables, this wooden sword that was sharper than any thorn and was meant to beat off an orc army or something. I don't remember. Folks, please crawl through our back catalogue for magic items episodes.
Meeting each other in public, that's what. The other type is a conceit of my own, I'm sure others, but I think very heavily tied to kind of the Tolkien style of magic item, where it is gained early by a character and grows with them. So it gains new powers for whatever conceited reason. Like the ring in Lord of the Rings, or Aragorn's sword that's a bit of scrap when he gets it at first and has to be put back together. Things like that. But Stormbringer from the Elric novels, that it grows with the characters, so you don't end up just endlessly swapping out swords. The sword you have gets better. Those two I like. But it means that you keep magic items to a minimum. You don't need a lot of them to have great impact on the world, as long as they're good. And yeah, +1 this, +1 that doesn't really fit within that to the same extent.
It's a tricky one to balance.
And he's trying to do it here by basically negating all the tables he's included, which you presumably bought the book for. Where were we?
I think we were done with the magic items. It's basically like a page worth of text of do it right and don't do it wrong when it comes down to it.
Thanks, Gary. Although he does give you some pitfalls to look out for. You know, I wouldn't say this is a bad section at all. I think it's required reading even today because so much of it preempts a lot of the, but what about this, opinion pieces that you see about role-playing games in general. So, yeah, I think I'd give him credit where it's due. 8 out of 10. Alright, territory development by player characters. This has also kind of fallen out of favour, although I know Matt Colville's Strongholds and Followers, was that?
Strongholds, Followers, and the almost ready, coming any day now. The printer messed up our books and we have to add stickers to all of the printed copies. Kingdoms and Warfare.
Kind of goes, this is going back into what Gary's talking about here, but so take us through it. Territory development by player characters, or you're a landlord now, Harry.
Yeah, it's another one of Gygax's unwritten assumptions, partly done by the fact that you really can't buy magic items in this edition, but yet you have to accumulate hundreds of thousands of gold pieces to fuel your ever burgeoning need for more experience points and levels. The assumption is that you're going to spend it on real estate, essentially, and just sort of go to the king, say, I would like to own this patch of wilderness, and then you're going to hire hundreds of workmen and a whole bunch of stone, and you're going to go build a castle, because you don't have anything else to do with this money. And here we start describing the process. Oh yeah, we'll include a very specific example. Assume that the player in question decides that he will set up a stronghold about 100 miles from a border town. Okay, hold on a second.
Yikes.
You're 100 miles from any civilization.
Pretty sure that's just a new kingdom. You know?
At that point, yes. I mean, to be fair, some people are very extreme. Presumably this is some form of early 70s sovereign citizen.
Fair enough.
Choosing an area of wooded hills as the general site. He then asks you if there's a place we can build a small concentric castle on a high bluff overlooking a river. This guy has a very specific idea what he wants.
It's a good place to put a castle.
Unless it's forward to the area, you inform him that he can do so. Give him a map of the hex where the location is and of the 6 surrounding hexes. I'm not sure when he did Ordnance Survey on this, several hundred miles of trackless wood. 100.
Well, from that outpost, you can probably see into the next hex, right?
I mean, okay, that's fair. It is on a bluff.
Don't make me do all the Gygax defending in this episode. It's a bloody good idea. Go that way for 5 days, build a castle, I don't know out of whatever, on the nearest hill you can find, and have a look about. You'll be fine.
It is an interesting delve into the process. So it starts going into the not only the process of building the castle, but also the process of clearing the area, of taking out all the monster layers, so that your troops no longer have to roll on the random encounter table whenever they're bringing more hapless settlers to build your castle for you.
See, this is the problem with fantasy colonialism. Why couldn't you have hired those orcs as labour? They'll do twice as much work in a day. Okay, you've got to stop them eating donkeys and things.
And the workers.
And the orcs are pretty good stoneworkers. Not to mention, they've got a great line in Palisades. They're like any orc settlement I've ever seen is all spiky wooden stakes. So while you're getting your stone keep built, good palisade up like that, and your palisade's full of orcs. Who's going to attack you? Really, honestly, humans overrated. I mean, bring them in for the skilled craftsmanship stuff later. That's where their strength lies. But in that initial push, you want orcs, trolls, ogres, hell, maybe even a hill giant for heavy lifting or earth moving to get the foundations of your castle down. And sure, you can. Don't worry, you can pogrod them later. I mean, we're not abandoning the plan, right? But it's an awful waste of good muscle and labour in the initial stages to just go and knock over the local dungeon. Put up employment posters.
The interesting, nature of the process of this, turning the trackless waste into a little bastion of civilization is an interesting one, but it is laced with some worrying text, including the section where he suggests that you could reduce the number of random encounters annoying your workers by the posting and placement of skulls, carcasses, etc. to discourage intelligent creatures and monsters of the type able to recognize that the remains are indicative of the fate of creatures in the area.
In fairness, their settlements are also covered in skulls. So I feel like that's just what responsible neighbours do here. Granted, they're human skulls, but you know what? That's fair. I mean, humans are pretty nasty.
How is it human skulls? They're 100 miles from the nearest town.
Yeah,
where did they get these?
You don't imagine
skulls?
we're the first people to try this, do you?
I mean, the dungeons are scattered all over these 6 mile hexes for some reason.
Yeah, they weren't built for nothing.
But yes, it is an interesting process of de-wildifying. And eventually you do... The DM is entitled to say that a certain hex is going to be pacified and is no longer going to have random counter checks. But he does then turn to that they almost someone might say some narrative needs on page 94. Because this is a fantasy adventure game, it is not desirable to have any player character's territory become tame and staid. There must always be a chance for some monster to enter the area and threaten the well-being of its inhabitants. What is the answer if the territory is located in the heart of some powerful state? Intrigue and petty wars, of course. The territory of a player character is part of a nation, then there will be jealous neighbours, assassins, and the like to threaten him and her. In this case, you'll have to devote more personal effort to seeing to it that there's still adventure and excitement involved in maintaining the fief.
Yeah, works for me.
It is interesting, though, that he has to admit that at a certain point, systems are not going to make your pacified area system. Like, adding mechanical weight to it is only going to have so much. Because this is not really a rulesy chapter. This is...
It's just pointing out some realities of geopolitics. In that if you remove a threat, and there's that threat is no longer taking up space and resources, either you occupy it or someone else does. It strikes me that the kind of the loose and light background for a game like Rangers of Shadowkeep, is that the name? Shadowdeep.
Rangers of Shadowdeep.
It's good, yeah. It's probably a mobile game by now. In the background, you encounter lots and lots of guys from the neighbouring kingdom who you were previously sort of maybe having a war with, but now they're the victims of the incursions from the Shadowdeep, and you end up kind of helping them and saving them, or not. That's your choice. So yeah, like there's lots of bad hombres out here just beyond the influence of what we're going to presume are human and demi-human kingdoms. But as soon as you clear those threats, other actors will be in the area going, hey, that's an opportunity. Let's get in there. I mean, our claim to the place is just as strong as our neighbours. That tends to be the way that fiefdoms and kingdoms work. So, yeah, expect some skullduggery. Expect some influx of second stage colonials. All sorts of interesting things can happen. You get to really interesting places in your game real quickly. None of this is a problem. This is all fertile ground.
I do want to just point out some random thing I noticed is that he keeps mentioning all the different hexes that you might want to map out. Does to say like, oh, there's like your giant 30-mile hexes for taking out vast squares of territory, and then there's like 1-mile hexes around the actual building point, and then there's a sort of assumption that you'll do out a battle of 30-yard hexes around the stronghold, so, for when the inevitable sieges happen. But there's no mention of, like, the classic, quote-unquote, classic 6-mile hex. That seems to either be a later or earlier invention that Gygax does not seem to even think about here. He's got his own ideas about hexes.
Yeah, is that because Gygax's idea about hexes is just mad? And someone later on came along and went, look, we've got to find a happy medium here. Let's go with 6, because, I don't know, it divides in.
Oh, and there's the other interesting section where the player who elects to build, it must be required to furnish you with a duplicate set of plans of the castle grounds, its dungeons and its interiors.
The player gets to draw them?
The player has to draw them.
That's awesome.
If you don't, I mean, it's great if you're an architect or a graphic designer. I'm not sure it's great.
Look, you can refine them, you can figure it out. But hey, that's what graph paper's for. But look, I mean, one of the joys of playing XCOM on your second or third run through it, this is old XCOM, folks. Unfortunately, they don't have quite the same idea in the new one. Is that you, at some point in the game campaign, you're going to get your door kicked in by the aliens, and they're going to invade your base, and it's going to be played out based on how you've built your base in the base management system, which means that early on in the game you might build a very sort of interconnected lackadaisy base thinking, it doesn't really matter. As it turns out, it absolutely matters, and it can be the difference between winning and losing the campaign. So a player who gets to design their own stronghold and say, here GM, here's the layout for my stronghold, you know everything about it, but knowing where everything is isn't the same as getting there, just like a dungeon. That's a beautiful thing. Here's your chance to flip the script to say, here's the difficult challenge. How are your ogres and bandits or whoever going to crack this one? You could have a lot of fun with that. That's cool. Just saying, as a former graphic designer. so I might be somewhat biased.
Yeah, but like, it's just like, I don't want to mean people who can't grip a pencil properly without using at least 4 fingers should not be excluded from also owning property.
Exactly. Yeah, there's lots of possibilities there. Hell, just go and look up, successful castles. Take a look at. Oh, okay. Back when this was released, looking up involved a trip to the library. But yeah, I think it's still a cool idea.
A slightly less cool idea is the estimated mean time to uprisings in your peasants, serfs, and slaves, which is how this section ends, I guess.
Okay.
And it's just a sort of a weird aside in demographics to say that if you do not treat your slaves well, they will almost certainly attempt an uprising once every 5 years minimum.
Okay.
And if you show any signs of weakness, there will be uprising immediately. Peasants will demand more freedom, rights, and lesser taxes. Serfs will be tempted to gain peasant status, and slaves will simply desire to be free. They will simply desire to slay their former masters and escape to where they can be free. Exact details are not possible here, but there is an estimate of 1 fighter for every 5 total slaves. As men, women, and anyone able to carry a club or knife will join in.
Man, that's expensive.
There will be 0-level peasant class troops, and they will have nil tactical ability, unless they somehow find mercenaries to help them.
Okay, and this is another good reason why you don't kill off the orcs and trolls in the region immediately.
So you can have a scapegoat or sort of threat.
Well, yeah, external threats will keep the peasants in line. If you're the only thing standing between them and having their homestead barbecued by the trolls, then they're very unlikely to listen to, Johnny Come Lately with his hammer and sickle, suggesting that you overthrow our feudal overlords, our protectors, as we like to think of them, and start an owl revolt. So yeah, this kill all orcs is a bad plan. It's bad economically. It's bad for politics. It's bad for your likelihood of succeeding as a future feudal overlord. Generally, you want a nice green other to keep brown, black, and white in line.
That's profound, but wasn't so goddamn terrifying.
I feel like I feel like I was born out of time now. I think I'd do very well in a Gygaxian campaign. We would at least give each other interesting things to chew over. But overall, I don't think that's a bad. I don't know how we got from treasure placement to this.
Money to slavery? I'm pretty sure slaves were one of the things mentioned as a possible source of treasure at some point in this book.
Yikes. Okay, and if a rising does occur, and let's face it, it should. It's the most dramatically interesting thing that can happen. The feudal underclass ally with the native orcs and realize that they've more in common with each other than they do with the oppressor who has raised the local population, has built his oppressive fortification, and demands tithes and tribute from all. And then you've got a sea of orcs and the manpower behind a skilled group of artisans creating nefarious traps and siege weapons to roll out against your cast. My God, this is going to be an amazing climax campaign. Or something.
Damn, I'm going to make notes. I have to make notes. This sounds like a con scenario, actually.
You can have some fun with it, yeah. Are we the baddies?
No, it says lawful good in our sheet. Don't worry about it.
Oh, well, if it's on the sheet, yeah, then we're fine. So each full month of successful revolt add 10% of the number of people, so some numbers to work with here. Assume 10% of the total force become equal to regular men at arms and training, because nothing like a revolt to gain experience, especially if you don't die. And after 6 months of successful revolt, the rebellion can be assumed to have taken on the status of a civil war. In other words, it's straight down the middle. Yeah. So, but that's high level play. That's the sort of end game stuff, right? You've got at least one seneschal and definitely a chamberlain who are hanging on your every word. It's like Birthright and things like that sort of deal with this much better. But regular D&D, I feel like Gary's maybe covering a bit too much ground here with this stuff. Stick to dungeons, which, as it happens, is what we'll be discussing in the next episode. As Gary Gygax, the master of games, the creator of D&D, lays out for us simple novice GMs, a sample dungeon. And that starts on page 94. And there's maps, and there's keys, and there's all sorts of dice rolling goodness. We're going to have a lot of fun. That map on page 95 is giving me a headache just looking at it. It's too much. But until then, Warlord, is this chutney or the remains of one of your more gibbed enemies?
Oh, don't worry. It keeps the very liberated workers of my Doom Fortresses well in line. Let's say, mash up a few of their previous oppressors, to butter their bread.
Right, so I'm glad I brought a packed lunch. Anyways, folks, we are the Adventuring Party. I am Savage Mick.
I am Warlord Scarr.
This has been Tomes of Gygax. We're presenting this from the incredibly increasingly gory drawing room, smoking chamber of the Warlord. But until next time, be safe, have fun, drink liberally, drive less, and this party's over.
Thanks for listening to The Adventuring Party. You can find show notes and links to things we've mentioned at www.theadventuringparty.net and on our Facebook page. You can leave comments there, or talk to our Twitter account at AdventuringPTY. Or you can record a voice message at www.speakpipe.com/theadventuringparty. We can also be contacted directly by email at party@theadventuringparty.net. If you'd like to be in touch with the party all the time, come join our Discord server, link in the show notes. The Adventuring Party is released under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share Alike on Version 3 license.